So welcome everyone. My name is Councillor Peter Perkins. I'm the Chair of the Planning Committee. Tonight we have an extraordinary Planning and Consultation Committee meeting. It is to hear one matter, and that is the application buildings and works to construct 4 shops at number 2 Mallee Court in Plenty. The matter's been called in by the Ward Councillor, Councillor Brooker. I'd just like to welcome everyone and reminded members of the public are advised that the meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the live stream recording will be made publicly available on YouTube and Council's website. Next agenda item is acknowledgement of country. Nillumbik Shire Council respectfully acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people as the traditional owners of the country on which Nillumbik is located, and we value the significance of the Wurundjeri people's history as essential to the unique character of the Shire. We pay tribute to all First Nations people living in Nillumbik, give respect to elders past, present and future, and extend that respect to all First Nations people. We respect the enduring strength of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung and acknowledge the ongoing impacts of past trauma and injustices from colonial invasion, massacres and genocide committed against First Nations people. We acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people hold a deep and ongoing connection to this place. We value the distinctive place of our First Nation people in both Nillumbik and Australia's identity, from their cultural heritage and care of the land and waterways to their ongoing contributions in many fields, including academia, agriculture, art, economics, law, sport and politics. We've got a late item, councillors. I'm looking for a procedural motion to allow this to be included in the agenda. Councillor Cope, you happy to move the motion to allow a presentation?
May I move that motion, please?
Okay, motion moved by Councillor Cope to allow a presentation. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Councillor Jumerick. Any discussion? Put it to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried. The presentation is a condolence for Kevin Andrews. I'll just read that out. We're deeply saddened to hear of the passing of former Liberal parliamentarian and minister, the Honourable Kevin Andrews, after a year-long battle with cancer. Entering the Australian Parliament in 1991, Mr Andrews served under the Howard and Abbott Liberal governments. He was a long-time representative for the federal seat of Menzies and was a wonderful advocate and supporter for Nillumbik Shire Council. He held a number of ministerial positions, including Minister for Defence, Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Public Service, Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Minister for Immigration and Citizenship, Minister for Social Services and Minister for Ageing. Mr Andrews was well known as a man of unwavering principle and conviction, whose dedication to his country, his faith, his family and his community defined his life. He made significant contributions across areas of defence, housing, immigration, ageing and social services, and was a strong and passionate advocate for his local community. Mr Andrews left Parliament in 2022, making the end of his 31-year political career. On behalf of Nillumbik Shire Council, we pass on our condolences to Mr Andrews' wife, family and parliamentary colleagues. Thank you, councillors. The next agenda item is apologies, leave of absence. All councillors are here and present tonight. Councillor Kate McKay is joining us virtually. Declarations of conflict of interest. Does any councillor have a declaration of conflict of interest? That being so, I think we can move forward now and listen to hear from our registered speakers. We have 3 registered speakers. I'll call you up in the order that registered. The first is Philip Devlin. The second is Philip Devlin on behalf of residents of 4, 5, 8, 10, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21 and 22 Mallee Court Plenty. And the third speaker is Director Benny Singh on behalf of Permits Hub Proprietary Limited, and they're the applicant. So first I'll call on Philip, if you're here, Philip, and you sit down. If you can turn your microphone on, you'll have 3 minutes, and then if you would stay afterwards, councillors might want to ask you a question or two. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you for arranging this meeting today. I'm Philip Devlin. I reside at 6 Melly Court. I feel we are in agreement that the land of number 2 needs to be developed, whether it's this proposal or another. We know something needs to happen, and I hope collectively we can be involved in the process to ensure an amicable outcome for all involved. My wife and I purchased a block of land and built a home as we wish to give our children the safety and security of a quiet suburban court, along with the freedom for them to play and thrive with their friends in the street. Their safety is paramount. I see allowing unfamiliar vehicles to enter Mallee Court as a concern without implementation and enforcement of relevant controls. Since moving in 18 months ago, I have witnessed an increase in overflow from the adjacent business centre with regards to the car parking, noting that there are over 50 car parks within the business centre. Multiple non-resident cars currently utilise the southwest side on the street and the nature strip from the entrance of Mallee Court for parking. This is adding to an already difficult entrance. The vacant land number 2 is quite often full of cars, and even on-street parking occurs further down Mallee Court into the bowl. Some afternoons and evenings, this can be as many as 30 to 40 vehicles as the business centre car park is full. My question is, where will these cars go, and what is the plan for potential overflow from the new development? Mallee Court is narrow, with a maximum of 2 car widths. If cars are parked on side road, this limits the road to a single lane. I feel the traffic management and car parking review from the proposed development has been insufficient and would like to understand what metrics are used to determine the proposed car parking and vehicle movements are satisfactory, as quoted in the report. My understanding of the planning laws within the Commercial Zone 1 is the determination of a shop can be almost anything without further planning approval. I would assume fast food and takeaway would be the target from the landlord, considering the size of the shops proposed. This would mean not only patrons attending to dine or collect orders, but increased traffic from delivery drivers, Uber Eats, Deliveroo, all utilising cars, motorbikes and scooters. Once they pass the proposed entrance car park, if it is full, they will be forced into the residential zone of the court to turn around, as there is no opportunity to do this once they have passed the proposed crossover. In addition, overall traffic entering the court will now potentially be increased to 60 to 80 movements a day. The entrance into Mallee Court can be dangerous at the best of times, with a lane restriction speed of 80 kilometres an hour. I feel personally my objection to the development based on the above has been ignored. We have followed the process, met online with the planning department, to only receive the officer's report stating that all objections have been addressed. I feel they have been dismissed. Safety for our children will never be dismissed. Thank you again for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to address you all today.
Thank you, Phil. Any questions, councillors, of Philip? Councillor Joy.
Hi, Philip. Thanks for coming to speak with us.
No worries.
So you said at the beginning of your speech that you feel that a development is needed, but you've raised several concerns with the proposed development.
Yep.
Do you have an idea of what may be more appropriate?
Look, from the local area, I think that it's a bit of an awkward size and it's a tricky block. And I think from the adjacent business centre, obviously there's the shops, the restaurant, and there's the little building block with the consultancy businesses, I suppose. Backing onto the service station and the mechanics, I understand is also a little bit awkward in, whether it is shops or, offices potentially for little consultancy businesses. From our point of view, if it was more consultancy where there would be adequate car park for staff and clients, basically, with the proposal for being shops could, like, obviously we have no say through planning at a later date when they go up for lease. You know, we are sort of concerned that it could be anything could go in there. What does that mean? What sort of traffic and car parking? And we're already battling in the court, so you know, I have no real answer of what would be suitable. You know, a large food chain would not be suitable either, I would think. So, but you know, working within the planning rules of the zone, I know there's a lot of different types that can go there.
Thank you. Councillor Jumerick.
Thanks for coming in. I suppose my question is, do you see that there's other, like your parking concerns could be addressed in other ways, like a permit or parking restrictions, or is that not?
Definitely parking restrictions, like you know, coming in off Diamond Creek Road into the entrance of the court to where the proposed driveway is going to be, which is up the sort of the top end of the development. What is it, you know, is there signage, local vehicles only past this point? Is there no standing? What are the rules with parking on the nature strips? Like on the left-hand side as you drive in, are cars legally allowed to park there now? Is there rules around?
Philip, we're not in a position to be able to answer your questions.
Sure, sorry. So definitely signage. I suppose from our point of view, that's what we would like to discuss further.
Through the chair, is it possible to ask the Director of Planning, is car parking allowed on those verges?
Thank you. So car parking is at the moment unrestricted there, so you are allowed to park there so long as you're not obstructing access through the road. However, we can monitor that if it becomes an issue.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors?
Sorry, can I ask the director? Oh, sorry, Kim.
I was going to mention one item of Phil's concern is people can park on the leisure strip, but that's not a legal option, is it?
Technically, no, you're not allowed to park on the nature strip. You need to park within the designated asphalt roadway. So technically, you're not allowed here.
And sorry, can I ask, would you be able to answer if we would be able to put in some restrictions for parking in that court, like some permit access or something?
Yes, certainly. So one of the considerations is around making sure that the development doesn't have a broader impact on parking and traffic movement. So the recommendation is to monitor that, and should that become an issue, council can then implement a parking restriction process there to address those concerns should they arise in the future.
Councillor McKay.
Yes, I was just wondering what was at 2 Mallee Court when you moved in there? When you moved into number 6, what was at 2 Mallee Court?
A vacant block.
And it's still vacant.
Still vacant, yeah, correct. Yeah. So the actual separate subject, but the actual marketing material that did come out with the advertisements for the subdivision, it was designed with renders showing 4 townhouses on that block. Obviously, since then, the block's been sold and purchased under the commercial zone that it is. So initially, we all thought it'd be townhouses, but that's obviously not the case.
All right, councillor, if there's no other questions of Philip, stay there, Philip, and you're now speaking on behalf of residents at 4, 5, 8, 10, 13, 14, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21 and 22 of Mallee Court.
Thank you, councillor. On behalf of the residents of Mallee Court, we would like to echo the sentiments mentioned earlier. Safety for our children and families is paramount to any inconvenience this development may cause. 80% of the residents within the court have children under the age of 18. There's 25 children, to be specific, that play and thrive within the street. we are looking to protect and maintain our narrow, quiet suburban court. We have read the officer's report and feel there needs to be further discussion around the following points prior to any decision being made. We feel our objections have not been addressed. Our requests to minimise the impact of Mallee Court with additional traffic management and car parking have not been considered in the report. Additional traffic entering the court will now be increased by potentially 60 to 80 movements per day. Already multiple cars enter the street, not realising it's a no-through road, occasionally travelling at speed, completing U-turns within our driveways and the court itself, creating a dangerous environment. We disagree with the traffic and transport team that the proposed car parking and vehicle movements are satisfactory, as we are already experiencing difficulties without the proposed development in place. Point 43 of the report states that this can be addressed in the future. However, we would ask that this is addressed prior to any formal decision. The officer's report states Mallee Court entrance is via slip lane. We disagree and would like to state that this is a very dangerous entrance with speed restrictions set at 80 kilometres an hour. The slip lane is further across, leading into the business centre car park, not into Mallee Court. We would like to include a review of the entrance as part of the traffic management controls for the proposed development. Contractors associated with the adjacent business centre constantly arrive at all hours of the night, specific to the tow trucks from the mechanics and the rubbish skip removal contractor from the business centre. We feel that this should not be happening between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m, and especially not after 8 p.m. Will this increase due to the new development? Over the preceding months, we have collected evidence to support all of the above concerns and would implore Council to review. Collectively, we will consider a deferred decision until we could collaborate with Council to determine adequate controls for traffic management and parking. We would anticipate minimal timeframe around this, potentially 2 to 3 months. If we can work together, you have our commitment that we will help accommodate a resolution for this development to proceed without further delay. If approved without further consideration, we'll be forced to appeal the proposal in its entirety. We are aware the appeals process could take several months into years for a resolution, and we would choose to avoid this. However, we will review if necessary. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Phil. Because you were speaking on behalf of a number of others, there's no opportunity to ask you questions again. So thanks for your presentation, or both presentations. Next and finally, we'll call on Director Benny Singh on behalf of Permits Hub Proprietary Limited.
Thank you, councillors. Good evening, everyone. And thank you, residents, for the speech. I just want to give a context about the site. It's an irregular block located in the corner of Mallee Court and Diamond Creek Road. It's presently approved as a commercial one zone. It's always been zoned as commercial one zone prior to the residential subdivision occurring at the land as well. As the officer report states, since 2005, the land's been always zoned for commercial one zone purposes. As part of the recent subdivision that occurred within Mallee Court, there was a Section 173 agreement placed on the land, which restricts access from Diamond Creek Road and seeks to vegetate that frontage with no development or built form. And that's in line with the design and development controls that are in place, which seeks to plant canopy trees and vegetation along that frontage. So which is why the only access provided to this land as part of the subdivision and the existing approved access way is through Mallee Court. So it was always envisaged to be a commercial development, and considering what the commercial one zone allows, it allows up multi-stories, mixed-use developments, and what this development seeks to achieve is merely most underutilisation of the land you could expect for a commercial zone, with only 30 to 40% of site coverage. In terms of car parking, there's actually a surplus of car parking. The planning scheme only requires 12 car spaces. This proposal provides for 13, and looking at the officer's recommendations, condition 1 requirements, the building would be reduced further to accommodate a 3-metre rear setback, which will result in a surplus of 2 car spaces if the current car parking layout's not altered. Now, the car parking layout's fairly accessible at grade, and it's been assessed by Council's traffic engineering team. In terms of safety concerns, the subject site's on a corner block. There is no reasons for vehicle to drive down Maley Court even when they're exiting the site. There's a dual width access way. It's been appropriately assessed by Council's traffic unit that vehicles can exit and enter the site in a forward manner. The usual driver behaviour would be to exit and turn left onto Maley Court and exit out to the Diamond Creek Road. There's no reason for any vehicles to be driving down Maley Court. In terms of what's occurring on land with illegal parking of vehicles from adjacent businesses, our clients aren't aware of that situation, but I think this development limits that and actually provides a proper car parking area.
Benny, you're out of time. Thank you.
Yeah.
But please stay there. Councillors may wish to ask you a question.
Sure.
Any questions, councillors? Well, I've got one. You talked about, and I think it's with reference to the officer recommendation, which talks about a 3-metre rear setback, and you said that would possibly lead to one extra car park. Can you just clarify that for me? So would that mean there'd be 14 car parks, not 13?
It would still be 13, but the requirement would reduce to 11 spaces based on the floor area reduction rather than 12 car spaces. So the planning scheme requires 4 car spaces per 100 square metres for a shop. Presently, the requirement is 12 car spaces, and that would reduce to 11 spaces.
Thank you. And like just looking at the plans, so the northern, I assume that's a fence on the adjacent to the car park. Is that some sort of fence, or is there's not access through to the service station, adjacent service station?
No, there's no access proposed. There would be a rear boundary fence.
Yep. Do you know what that boundary fence is? How's it look? What's it made of?
It's standard timber paling fence, but I don't think that level of detail was requested, but we can at this kind. But generally, it is a 1.8 metre standard timber paling fence, which is it adjoins a commercial interface. So I don't think there's any other requirements for that.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Thanks very much, Benny. Appreciate
Thank you.
your submission. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, councillors, I'll look for a motion. Councillor Brooker.
Thank you, Chair. There's a proposal to refuse a permit for Maley Court. So I'll just read this out quickly, that the committee, acting under delegation from the council, issue a notice of decision to refuse to grant a permit to the land located at 2 Maley Court Plenty for buildings and works to construct 4 shops on the following grounds. 1, the proposal is inconsistent with the design objectives and building setback schedule 4 to clause 4302, design and development overlay, resulting in insufficient landscaping and amenity impacts to the nearby residential development. 2, the proposal does not meet the clause of 5206 car parking in relation to car parking and traffic impacts to Maley Court and amenity impacts to local residents. 3, the proposal does not meet the objectives of clause 1307 1S, land use compatibility due to insufficient provision for the storage and collection of waste.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Do we have a seconder?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Mayor Jimrak. Councillors, any councillor wishing to speak? Councillor Brooker?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Here, councillors, is a classic conflict between local planning provisions, zoning, height limits, land use, which generate unintended consequences that negatively affect surrounding amenity in Mallee Court and generate traffic and parking pressures, noise and disturbance, loss of the residential character of Mallee Court. The problem is not that the proposal checks the boxes for car parking provision, but more that the site currently acts as an informal car park for the adjacent businesses. The overflow parking already creates congestion. This proposal will result in the replacement of the informal car park that just last Thursday had 17 cars parked within it and 8 cars parked illegally on the nature strip of Mallee Court. This proposal provides 13 car spaces for the employees and customers of 4 additional businesses to an area that the report references is a very constrained site in dot points 23 and 29. Mallee Court will essentially turn into a site for the current informal overflow car parking from the adjoining commercial businesses. This overflow will reduce parking availability in Mallee Court and produce traffic, noise, and other externalities that the application does not properly consider. You can imagine the congestion as cars circle Mallee Court to find parking. This will impact the neighbourhood aesthetic and functionality of a small residential court. The residents of Mallee Court will pay an unacceptable price for this development and bear an inequitable burden in attempting to meet a parking demand that can never be met. Section 65 of the Planning and Environment Act provides the decision guidelines that local planning provisions must incorporate. Section 65 is clear that Nillumbik must not only consider compliance with the planning scheme, but the broader amenity impacts of the proposal. There are site-specific considerations that must be accounted for in reaching a decision. The relevant provisions of Section 5206 car parking include 1, to ensure that car parking does not adversely affect the amenity of the location. 2, to ensure the design and location of car parking is of a high standard, creates a safe environment for users, and enables easy and efficient use. Fundamental to the planning system is to promote orderly development, and that is where community and amenity and livability are key considerations. The strategic intent of the commercial zone providing commercial activities are running headlong into the practical outcomes that this proposal will generate. An acceptable development, is planning speak, should not impose a disproportionate burden on the residents of Mallee Court. So the broader impacts of the proposal need to be assessed according to the livability considerations, not just the box checking of allowing 13 car park spots. Dot point 28 references how the proposal falls short of the minimum setbacks on the south boundary to Mallee Court. Indeed, the urban design team on page 13 recommends increasing the north and south boundary setback and a continuous footpath to connect to Diamond Creek Road. If you are short of the minimum, that has other consequences for aesthetics in the case specified, waste collection, but also others. The 2 metre setback, less than 3, the report says allows for medium trees and not canopy trees. I do know that in the neighbourhood character strategy for Apollo Parkways, 3 metre side setbacks are recommended to provide for canopy trees that this proposal states there is insufficient room for. Although we do not know the tenancy makeup of these commercial properties, the properties adjacent to it have a variety of cafes, takeaways, food and similar enterprises, and I would expect similar businesses in this location. All by definition would require multiple car movements, which would again potentially lead to multiple traffic movements in Mallee Court. The design and development overlay refers to appropriate
Just
scale
winding
and
up.
landscaping.
Councillor Brooker.
because it just falls short of community expectations amongst other things. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. Councillor Jumerick, do you wish to speak? Or Mayor Jumerick, sorry.
Looking at this, and I've listening to Councillor Brooker, I think he's put a very good case, but I'm still concerned that we would not be able to defend it at VCAT. So I am very torn on this one, but I commend Councillor Brooker for his valid attempt.
Thank you, Mayor Jumerick. Any other councillor wishing to speak? Councillor McKay.
I would just like to say that I think it's very tough for small business. You know, residential zoning always and often comes up against commercial zoning, and living together is important. But where do we expect our small businesses to go if not on an irregular shaped site on a main road in an area where other small businesses are? I've previously lived in an area like this as a residential area with young children, and you know, there was just a level of acceptance that is where I lived. I lived near a main road, 3 or 4 houses up, and there are shops there, and people need to shop somewhere, and small businesses need to be somewhere. I know it's difficult, but it's the smallest footprint. They've gone above and beyond for car parks. It's not their responsibility to be making car parks for other businesses. And I think that we should just be more strict with people parking on the nature strip so they know they can't park there, so that does not impact the residents. That's my comment.
Thanks, Councillor McKay. Any other councillor? I might just sum up my thoughts. You know, 15 years in council, I've read a lot of planning reports. This one's very supportive of, you know, actually granting the permit. And there isn't really many reasons not to support the officer recommendation. I can't see myself supporting this motion. On the face of it, it's a good application. There might be some issues into the future with parking, which can be addressed, and officers have committed that they will work with residents to do that. The history of the site and the previous applications have been much more intensive, a much larger footprint, built form, basement car park, double storey. That was something worth objecting to. I'm not sure that this application is. It doesn't fit that category. I think, you know, officers and the applicant have worked hard to get this application up, and I think it's summed up best in the officer report, paragraph 23, where they said it's challenging for planning officers to envisage a lower scale commercial development that would be viable on such a small constrained site beyond what is currently being considered. Having the site remain undeveloped and is not considered a positive planning or urban design outcome in a location where the commercial development is encouraged by the planning scheme. So I'm very concerned that, you know, supporting Councillor Brooke, and I congratulate him. He's a very hard-working councillor, working hard on behalf of his constituents, local residents. But I think council to support Councillor Brooker's motion could backfire massively. And it could end up being a massive own goal. I'm concerned that a VCAT appeal of this application will effectively force large delays on the development and potentially have the applicant substitute plans. Plans are a lot more intensive, plans that actually will even further reduce the amenity of the local area and the residents of Mallee Court. So, you know, in terms of listening to the residents, I do understand it's a young area. You didn't feel your objections, you know, were addressed, but, you know, reading the report, the officers are committed to assessing the application, and the parking on site is primarily what they're looking at. And there was a requirement to supply 12 car parks The applicant is proposing to deliver 13, and if the officer recommendation was to be supported tonight, it's a smaller footprint and there'd only be 11 car parks required under the planning scheme, with the applicant providing 13. It's an extra 2. It's been a commercial one zone for 19 years. You know, everyone in that street certainly should have known that was the zoning. I've run out of time, so I'm going to stop speaking, and I'll give Councillor Brooker the right to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, here we have, as I've just said, a conflict between the provisions of the planning scheme and what really the intent of an orderly planning scheme is to do, which is to avoid these very problems that is going to be created from this application. What we are trying to do is say that there is no actual provision that we can envisage right now that is going to be sufficient that would, you know, assuage both parties. But it's really about the unintended consequences that happen when you have a site which is a car park now. It's a car park now. And so those cars will need to go somewhere else during the construction, and where will they go? That is really, I think, some of the unintended consequences that I keep referring to. They're going to be going down Mallee Court. So once it's built, then it's catered for in terms of the 13 car spots, but they're for those businesses, not for all of the others. And so you have a clash between a commercial zone and a residential zone, and it's really, it's not so much a square peg in a round hole, but it's kind of oil and water that aren't really mixing terribly well, if I can use that kind of analogy. That is what we're trying to kind of get to work here, and it's proving extremely difficult. I say it's so far it seems impossible to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooker. I'll put that motion to the vote. All those in favour? And against? The motion's lost. Okay, councillors, we do need to make a decision, so I'll look for another motion. Councillor Cope.
Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we accept the council planning permit. And I know it is an issue, and we ask the council to look at further after the permit, look at the opportunity.
Councillor Cope, I'll help you out there. Are you seeking to move the officer recommendation as per the papers?
To accept the planning officer's papers, yes.
Yep. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Joy. You wishing to speak, Councillor Cope?
I would like to mention that, I'd hope that once the planning permit's accepted, the opportunistic parking is controlled. I mean, that is obviously the concern of the residents, and we've got to make sure that we do our best in controlling that. Yeah, cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Second to wish to speak, Councillor Joy.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Perkins. Just like to acknowledge that while I empathise with the residents' concerns, to Councillor Brooker's point, I don't think it's the responsibility of the owner of that site to provide for overflow parking of other businesses. And as is noted in the officer's report, it is difficult to envisage a lower scale commercial development that would be viable on that site. And finally, just highlighting that I do think it's a very important point that officers continue to monitor parking and traffic issues in Mallee Court.
Thank you, Councillor Cope. Any other councillor wishing to speak? Oh, sorry, Councillor Joy. Nope. Look, I'll just. Oh, it's any other councillor wishing to speak? Yeah.
Look, I'm speaking against the motion. I would refer to dot point 43, which has just been mentioned. In the event car parking and traffic movements along Mallee Court become an issue in the future, the Transport and Traffic and Transport team can explore various options around mitigating such scenarios beyond the planning permit as a local road manager. I would say that's in Texas Hold'em style a tell, even by raising that issue as saying, look, in the event that it happens, we're going to take action to kind of mitigate the bad impacts of it. I think that's really acknowledging that it's very much the case that traffic impacts are likely to happen. And I do think we do need to do some extra work in terms of allocating some resources to really come up with an adequate solution. The residents actually themselves weren't going as far as I was this evening in their submissions to us. What they said to us this evening is that they wanted several months or however long it took to address the car parking, traffic and amenity issues that we've talked about. Well, that is what we need to do to make this a good planning application, which I don't think it meets that standard right now. So I do think we've raised it in point 43 in the event that these things happen. We need to allocate some resources to doing it. I'll be pursuing that fact myself, but it was actually, you know, the residents didn't want a refusal tonight. What they wanted was to get the traffic impacts organised, get a residential permit system organised. That is what the residents, that was their position. So I think we need to work as a council very hard and cleverly and well to facilitate those objectives that were described this evening. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Brooker. I'm certainly encouraged that the residents didn't want to refuse, it was only yourself. Because, yeah, as I stated previously, a refusal may well lead towards a much worse outcome, you know, a much more intense development in size, scale and bulk. You know, there are some good things that come out of this proposal. I'm not sure what the shops are going to be that go in there, but the residents will have direct and easy access to those shops. They also have a footpath well, they will have a footpath that's currently not there, as I understand. So there'll be a link to Diamond Creek Road and beyond via a sealed footpath on that side of the road. There is one on the other side. So yeah, I'm supporting of the motion, the officer recommendation. I think the officers have done good work here, particularly in the context of the previous applications. I think this is probably the best solution that we can hope for in terms of the planning process. The whole council is here. We're all very aware of the traffic concerns. That'll be monitored. We will support the residents and we'll support Councillor Brooker into the future, I'm sure, if more work needs to be done, you know, in terms of signage, parking enforcement, restrictions, whatever is required. The concerns are valid, but it's not enough to refuse the application. So I'll put this motion to the vote. All those in favour? And against? It's carried. The motion's carried. That's the end of the meeting tonight. I think I better just run through the agenda quickly. Read out what else there might have otherwise been, which there's not. Agenda items number 6, supplementary and urgent business. There's none. Confidential reports, there are none. And close the meeting, so declare the meeting closed at 7:48. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you.